Welcome to part two of Let's Talk Theater with Richard Sanford from the Columbus Underground.
Several critics in town I grew up around, and one was a friendship that was incredibly important to me, and I learned a lot. And he went for that laugh. Well, he was a music critic, not a theater critic. He went for that stab. And sometimes it was hysterical. And back when the weeklies had letter columns, they would generate plenty of letters. And I, I still have a little bit of that tendency I try to steer clear of, but I haven't always. Sometimes I screw that up.
Well, sometimes we all screw up, something that we do. I think the most important thing is to know that, and to know our weaknesses and things that we need to be aware of so that we can improve, and do better versus just doing something going, oh, well, too bad, and doing it again, and with no remorse, or reflection on what you have done. One of the things I was wondering about reviewers is, how do you deal, Richard, with, because I know you get sometimes some flashback from people or back from people who are upset with your review or feel that you didn't, give me justice, or that you didn't even show up. How do you deal with that? Because Columbus is such for me, and this is just how I feel about it. We're like a little New York Broadway, off Broadway. We got something going on, when we don't have COVID over our heads and something.
Yes.
Every weekend there's 2 or 3 productions going on.
Yep.
There may be 4 productions going on at 4 different places, in the city at the same time.
Yes.
Because we are such a vibrant theater community that are really even during COVID, we still managed, to be productive, whether we've had to do it stream live or whatever. We stream live and live. We have done go to the website and on demand.
Yes.
We have really in Central Ohio, especially the members of the theater, Central Ohio Theater Roundtable, to those companies, we have really worked hard at keeping theater, trying to keep a theater alive. And so even though through COVID, you still got a lot of stuff, Richard. There's still a lot of things that are going on. How in the world do you handle that? Because I know you got to be getting, it's like you can't be everywhere at every time. And we don't have enough reviewers. And as far as I'm concerned, too, minority reviewers,
Agreed.
In Columbus. And that's why people have been trying to get me to do it. But I'm like, then that's why I'm asking you this question.
Yep, absolutely.
How do you deal with that piece?
That's a fair question, right? It's always fair, and you're right. I mean, like I say, I can do 5 things in a month, and that's also fair on the part of my outlet. The first year or so before this was nailed down as much as it is, if there were 9 things, original type works in a month, I'd try to review all 9. I'm also a vice president of a bank, right? I've got a relatively demanding day job. I'm trying to and trying to do 9 things. Some of the work suffered, right? I was just stretched too thin. So I try to, and that's why when I'm looking at something, and if there's an option of, all right, I've reviewed this company the last 3 times, I'm going to give this company a chance this time. I try to, in addition to prioritizing based on the type of work, I try to do that. But even then, there are things I miss. I felt terrible. Somebody from a company emailed me and said, "Is this me personally? You've missed. You told me you can't." I told them I couldn't fit something in, and they're like, "Well, you missed the last thing I directed, also." And I'm very sorry you feel that way, but the last thing you directed, my girlfriend and I were in Italy for 10 days. I missed both those weekends because I was out of the country. And this one, I already had Catco Short North Stage, And one of my oldest friends' birthday dinner booked that opening weekend. I literally could not fit them in with everything I already had scheduled. So it sucks, and there should be more critics. There definitely should be more minority critics.
Yeah, because that's just a piece that I think people miss, that we only have a handful of people that actually go out, and have that's why actually I started Let's Talk Theater, trying to just add another piece for us to be able to know what's going on, and to be able to have people have a platform to talk about, what they're doing. It's because it's needed.
Yes. Oh, definitely.
Because it's needed. It's uh, one of those things, Richard, and I'm so happy. I'm so happy we're having this interview because it's just touching on a lot of things that I'm sure people haven't really thought about. And one of the things that you brought up was the volunteer piece, and the extra job, part time commission piece. You know, Most of us in theater, we have full time jobs.
Oh, yes.
Or we're doing things that we have families, we're doing full time jobs, we have our own license stuff too. And with the few that we have, we're trying to fit in as much as we can, do. And it is hurtful to us. And that we can't do more,
Right.
that we have to, like you said, I have to miss this, but I was out of town. I do got a personal life. It's nothing I can, and I'm glad that that person or whoever it was able to come to you, because that's another piece in that we have missing is people aren't sometimes willing to go directly to the source and say, hey, what's up? So that we can explain ourselves,
Right.
so that you can say it's not you. This is what's going on, because a lot of times instead of that, they could have just easily just went around and said, Richard don't never come in, and blah, who knows? Let's hope they're not doing it anyway. But you know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
That people are able to come to you, me, whoever, if they have an open door. So that's why it's important that some of us have an open door policy, that people feel comfortable enough that they can come and and say to us like, hey, what's going on? Is this personal? Or whatever, so you can clear that up.
Yeah.
To let that person know that it's not, and it helps keeps building those relationships so that we don't lose relationships just from lack of, we don't just, it's not that we aren't doing this, but we just don't have time, or it doesn't fit in the schedule, but we really are trying to support you,
Right.
you know?
Right. I mean, there are things that have happened a couple years in a row, and they just happen to fall at times. Like normally, this time of January, I've been in New York for APAP, the Under the Radar Festival and Winter Jazz Fest, and so there are a couple of things that usually happen late January. I'm like, I couldn't sign up for a preview for it if I wanted to because I don't have the time to schedule an interview and transcribe because this week gets in that way.
And I can attest personally that I know that, if I'll eat that, you're open to email, hey, Richard, I'm doing this sort of thing. And you say like, hey, I'm either available this week or I'm not available that week. You know what
Right.
I mean? And it's just one of those, um, how do I want to say, scheduling. Everything
Yes.
can't be scheduled when you want it to, and especially if it's one person and that's doing it. What do you think, Richard, is one of the most challenging things we have going on for us right now in the theater community in Columbus, Central Ohio?
I think space. I think available, affordable space is the biggest challenge right now. It's great that Mad Lab owns their building and they provide space to a lot of companies. What Joe Bashar is doing with Abbey Theater is fantastic. Um, Red Herring's new space down in my family's stomping grounds of the old Great Southern Shopping Center. I'm a big fan of, but I think a lot of people still think downtown when they think about theater, and they how do I want to say this? And I think, I mean, rents, right? Theater spaces is the least of the problems with the massive rent and real estate bubble we're under. That hands down. I do not want to claim it's where people should live. Where people can live is a much, much bigger problem. But for the arts community, I think the lack of available space is probably the biggest problem. And one of the things I point to that for, and I think there are other factors in this, but for many years, you'd see every couple years a group of fresh-faced college students who wanted to start a theater company. And most of them would only do a couple productions, but it gave an influx of talent and an influx of new ideas to the more established companies. And some of them ended up lasting for a very long time. But even when they didn't, you still had that electricity of new energy. And I don't see as much of that the last 7 or 8 years. Though I also don't have to sit through as many versions of Sam Shepard's True West either. So there might be a plus there once in a while. But I don't see as much of that new energy and excitement. And I think a lot of it is these kids can't, these 22-year-old men and women can't get a space for what they can afford. They can't get a rental that's cheap enough for them to be able to do it.
Well, as a person that has a theater company that doesn't have a theater building, I say you are absolutely correct. One of the hardest things that I have found with Mind for God Productions, and especially since COVID. Before that, it was hard. It's extremely hard now with the closing down of the Shed Theater with the Columbus Performing Arts
Yes.
Center being a major opportunity for for companies like myself that didn't have a home theater not being utilized. It has been tremendously hard for theater companies, or as you say, anybody that wanted to put on a production to find somewhere to put it on. And like you said, we are so blessed that Mad Lab opened up their theater, that Dublin opened up their theater space for us. The Van Fleet finally opened up,
Yes.
for us. So we finally got the Van Fleet open. But those are very small venues.
Yep.
And they're not like, they don't have as much space as like the Shed had. You could get at least 200 and something more, plus people in the Shed. These other places, you're getting 100 and something, which
Right.
is revenue that you can't gain, because those are seats that you can't get. So, and then the ones that might have bigger space, they're so expensive. Like you said,
Yes.
college kids, they're trying to put something on. They can't afford thousands of dollars. And then on top of it, you say to them that they can't even use their own in-kind technical experience. They have to use yours, because they might be
Yes.
able to bring in, if they're a college student, stuff, they may, hey, this is something I'm majoring, I'm an intern, and I can come in here and I can do the lights and I can do
Right.
that. And then we don't even have to pay for that. Can we use your building? And they have locked us out that way by saying, no, you can't. You can use our building, but you have to pay to use our techs. And that's where
Yep.
we can't afford it. So having the city of Columbus not opening up that Shed Theater has been a really big. And then of course we have the Columbus metropolitan libraries that are closed up, so people can't on Sundays and stuff, and they've closed up at 6 o'clock. So that's knocked us out of rehearsal space. This public libraries was a valuable resource
Yes.
for theater companies to use for rehearsal space. And some of it, like in the main library, you could put a show on in the auditorium.
Yep.
But COVID has also shut that down.
Yeah.
So it's very limited. So you're right on the money. I agree with you that probably one of our biggest challenges right now for theater companies that don't own a theater
Yep.
space is finding space. And so some companies haven't been able to even produce anything during the COVID because they don't have the technical stuff to do the virtual streaming, and they don't have the space.
Right, and that's and well, like you said, once you take away Shed, when you take away one theater space with the remarkably vibrant theatrical community we have at the moment, right? It's now suddenly everybody who used that. And you're right. Now the Van Fleet's open. That'll take some of that slack off. But when both of them were closed, I mean, your group used those a lot. Past productions use that a lot. State of the art. Imagine, that's there. You can countless companies.
Had that space. So you're right on the money. Let's see, before we close out, this has been a really good, I think, informative interview for the audience members in regards to what you do, what reviewers and critics do are looking for, what you see personally, and the challenges that you have, as a reviewer, and balancing out what you think versus what is actually being seen, and performed, and the challenges that we see in our theater community right at this particular time. Richard, this has been a really great interview with a lot of great, valuable information that my audience members are going to really benefit from. Would you please, before we end this interview, just tell our audience a little bit about how they can get in touch with you, where they can see those fabulous interviews that you do for the Columbus Underground, and just maybe a word of encouragement for someone out there that's producing a play and are kind of nervous about being reviewed.
So the interviews are all at columbusunderground.com. And anyone can reach me at the email richard@columbusunderground.com, and that'll forward to my personal email. And and I will say, I know the theater critics in town pretty well. There isn't someone who writes for another outlet I don't consider a friend, and I enjoy their company. I enjoy reading their work. I haven't met anyone who writes about theater, who takes the time to do this, whether it's their main job or a side job, who doesn't do it because we love theater. Every single one of us wants to enjoy something. We want to appreciate what you're doing. Obviously, being nervous is part of the process. I've done open mics and poetry. I've appeared on stage. No, not thank God for everyone, not as an actor. It's part of the process, right? You won't know how good you are until you put it on a stage. We can expose an audience to your work in a wider scale than just you hitting up your social media friends. We're part of this with you. We're all part of the theater community. And I am hungry for new work. I want to see what you're working on right now.
Well, thank you again, Richard. I'm so grateful and blessed and pleased that you took the time to be interviewed when you were so busy out there reviewing all of the wonderful works that are going on in Central Ohio's theater communities right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. The pleasure was mine.
Thank you for joining me, Julie Whitney Scott, your producer and host of Let's Talk Theater, a Mind for God Productions sponsored event, heard only on WGRN LP 94.1. For the full video interview, go to my Julie Whitney Scott Facebook page.